So when your relationship doesn't feel right, you feel frustrated, you feel confused, and your gut says to walk away. But before you do, let me ask you this. What if the problem isn't your relationship, but the lens that you're viewing it through? So we've all heard that advice to trust our gut, especially when it comes to relationships. But what if this well-meaning advice is leading you astray? Our perception shapes our reality, especially in romantic relationships. That nagging feeling in your stomach, it actually might be way more deceptive than you think, and it can drastically alter how we experience our relationships. So in this video, we're going to explore why your gut feeling might be lying to you and how you can rewire your relationship lens for a happier, healthier partnership. So how exactly does our perception shape our relationship reality? Well, our minds can play tricks on us, especially when it comes to love. You might think that you're seeing your relationship clearly, but the truth is our brains are wired to focus on the negative. It's kind of like wearing glasses that filter out all of the good stuff and magnify the bad. This isn't just some random quirk, it's a well-documented psychological phenomenon. Dr. Gleb Tsipursky, who's an expert in cognitive biases, explains that just because something feels bad doesn't make it bad. And just this simple statement challenges everything that we've been taught about trusting our gut in relationships. Think about it. How many times have you heard someone say, if it doesn't feel right, then it's probably not right? You know, this advice is everywhere, from self-help books to well-meaning friends. But this widely accepted wisdom is actually leading our brains astray. Tsipursky argues that blindly trusting your gut feelings in relationship can be downright dangerous. He even goes as far as to say that this kind of thinking contributes to high divorce rates. So this may sound like a bold claim, but when you consider how often we misinterpret situations based on our own biases, it actually starts to make sense. So let me give you an example. Imagine you're having a great date with your partner. Conversation's flowing, you're laughing, you feel a real connection. And so you go home feeling on top of the world, certain that they felt the same. But then radio silence, no text, no calls, what gives? Well, this specific bias is what we call the illusion of transparency. We can assume others can read our thoughts and our feelings just as easily as we can. But in reality, our perceptions often don't match up with others, leading to misunderstandings and hurt feelings. So you can see just that simple bias can show that our gut feeling, our gut instinct, is not always accurate. But this is not just about misreading our partners. We also have the tendency to focus on the negatives in our relationships. And this creates kind of a skewed reality. You know, there are a lot of studies about how people often have a cognitive bias toward negative interpretations. This is because our brains are wired for survival, right? They're wired to look for danger. So our brains will always try to look at the negative to make sure that we're always being aware of any potential danger. But this means that we're more likely to remember the one time our partner forgot our birthday than the countless other times that they've actually shown up for us. So this negativity bias can wreak havoc on our communication and our understanding. It's like our brain is constantly looking for evidence that something is wrong, even when things are going well. And guess what? If you're always looking for problems, you're going to find them, whether they're really there or not. So the next time you have that gut instinct telling you something's off in your relationship, take a step back, ask yourself, am I seeing the whole picture or am I falling into this perception trap? So understanding these cognitive biases is the very first step towards rewiring your relationship lens. But how do we actually go about changing our perceptions? And just before we jump in, if you do want more videos like this, then feel free to subscribe to my channel for new videos every single week. How do we rewire our relationship lens to see things a bit more clearly and a bit more accurately? Well, it turns out we actually have a lot more control over our perceptions than you might first think. The very first step is to actively choose where to put your attention. But in practice, it's kind of trying to like steer a ship that's been on autopilot for years. Our brains are wired to focus on the negative. So we need to consciously redirect our attention to the positive aspects of our relationships. So this is where it becomes a choice. We need to choose to see the positive. But don't get me wrong, this isn't about ignoring problems or putting on rose-colored glasses. Instead, it's about deliberately shifting our focus to the good stuff in our relationships. So think of it kind of like training a muscle. The more you practice looking for the positive, the easier it becomes. And this isn't just some feel-good advice. This is backed by science. There's research that shows that actively focusing on positive attributes can actually change our perception of our relationships over time. It's kind of like creating a new filter for our relationship lens. Next, let's talk about something called the actor-observer bias. So this cognitive bias can really mess with how we view our partner. Actor-observer bias essentially puts us in one of two modes. We are either in actor mode or observer mode. When we're in actor mode, we explain our own behavior with the situation or the environment. So if we do something that maybe upsets our partner and our partner complains, in actor mode, we essentially excuse that behavior by saying, well, this is the situation, this is the environment that I'm in. That's why I had the behavior that I had. Whereas when we're in observer mode, we look at our partner's behavior and other people's behavior, and we explain that behavior as reflections on their character. We're looking at them doing very similar things or the same thing, and we're saying, well, that's their personality. They did that because it's their personality, it's their attitude, it's their mood, it's their inability to do things. And this is a bias because we're setting two different standards for the very same behavior. We're excusing our own behavior, whereas for our partner's behavior, we're painting their character. We're saying this is something deeply ingrained within them. So let's say, for example, if your partner forgets your anniversary, you might think to yourself, they're so inconsiderate, right? But if you forget the anniversary, you might say, well, I've just been so busy with work lately. Do you see the difference? This bias can lead us to a lot of unfair judgments and misunderstandings in our relationships. And understanding this bias is really, really crucial because it helps us realize that we might not be seeing the whole picture. Our partner's actions might have a lot more to do with their circumstances rather than their character, just like ours do. Because the actor-observer bias specifically will give us a gut feeling of negativity towards our partner. But this feeling is an assumption, so it may feel like your partner is doing something to spite you, whereas in reality, we're simply looking at things through our own dirty lens. Next, it's important to take responsibility in our relationships. It's really easy to point fingers when things go wrong, but the truth is both partners will play a role in shaping the relationship dynamic. So understanding this can really change the game in your relationship. So as an example of this, working on humility regarding your own communication abilities. You know, when you couple the actor-observer bias with communication, this can lead us to saying, well, our partner needs to take responsibility for how they speak to me. But then when we don't communicate well, then we can often say to ourselves, well, this is because I've had a stressful day. So in other words, we may need to recognize that we might not be as good at communicating as we think we are. And this awareness can help us be more mindful of how we express our feelings and how we interpret our partner's actions. So rewiring your relationship lens isn't about seeing everything through rose-colored glasses. It's just about developing a more balanced, realistic view of your partnership. It's about recognizing that your gut feeling isn't always right and that your perceptions can and often are skewed by cognitive biases. So what are some practical steps that can help you transform your relationship lens? So remember the actor-observer bias that we spoke about earlier? With that, we can start noticing when this pops up in your relationship. Try keeping notes of the times when you catch yourself attributing your partner's actions to their character whilst excusing your own based on the circumstances. So this might feel a little bit weird at first, but this awareness can be eye-opening because it gives you a lot more self-awareness on how your thoughts are manifesting. And then once you've logged it a few times, challenge yourself to reinterpret those thoughts. So ask yourself, what external factors might have influenced my partner's behavior? So this simple shift in perspective can help you see your partner's actions in a whole new light. But here's the thing, transforming your perception on your partner's actions isn't just a solo mission. It's crucial to involve your partner in the process. So this can be opening conversations about possible misinterpretations that you may have had on your partner's action. Being curious, asking questions, and digging into their feelings rather than simply assuming that you know what they were thinking and what they were doing. So that's why it's crucial to recognize these biases so that we can overcome them and actually rebuild the connection between us and our partner. And obviously learning this process is a lot more detailed than I can go into in a YouTube video, but these are the skills that I work on with all of my successful Ultra Normal members. And if you do want to join us, then sign up for the free relationship bootcamp, where you'll learn the same steps to start turning your relationship around today. Click on the link in the description to grab your spot. And that's the challenge, is that our gut instinct is there for protection, but ultimately that protection can end up becoming more of an attack. And this can cause a lot of toxicity in relationships. When we see things through the actor-observer bias, that can cause us to think that our partner is a toxic person rather than thinking of the situational aspects around our partner's behavior. And this can lead to a negative feedback loop. And this feedback loop can build into creating a more toxic relationship. So if you do want a deeper dive into toxic relationships and whether they can be saved, then I'll leave you with this video right here. I'll see you over there.